Not crazy amount, I'd say. With YouTube, I'm very impressed. It's probably up a good 150 subscribers since then and going up
Nice.
every day, which is really cool to see. As far as Twitch goes, I went up about 100 follows, which is really nice. So
Yeah.
it's been a general increase, which has been really cool to see.
Yeah. Tim, I don't know if you have
We've
any
had
more
some
questions.
storms since then.
Yeah.
I guess my question is just, over your area. I think this week has actually been a little busy for storms too. You do anything differently now when that happens?
Yes, surge protector wise, that's in. I will say it's hard to avoid the storms, and I am a streamer.
Yeah.
I may have streamed gently whilst there was a storm nearby, not necessarily as close, but I do keep an eye on it, and I do have a surge protector now to try to stay safer.
I can tell you what, we work when the storms are happening too. We got a lot of equipment over here, and we try and keep it as safe as possible, right? But
Right.
good to know going forward.
Yeah, I mean I'm glad you're safe. I think at the end that's the great thing, and it's a great lesson. I'm glad you're talking to people because, as Tim mentioned, this is just a great example. It really tells us, as you probably know, people don't pay attention to our safety tips, but if you have proof like this, it's like, hey, this has actually happened. People will believe us now and take it seriously. And it is one of those things I don't think people think about. We have so much cordless electronics nowadays, but as a streamer, when you're plugged in like this, you got a lot of stuff in the system, and so I think you're one of the few people that maybe as going forward, this will be a safety tip we give the most streamers. Like, hey, as you mentioned, have that surge protector and think about. I always thought about during events like this. It wasn't. I hate to say this. It wasn't always about my safety. I was trying to protect my equipment, so I would unplug everything just to make sure it didn't get fried.
Right.
Good tips for sure.
All right, Christian. Thank you so much for joining us. And you want to give a shout? Like, what is your handle now? Crispy Mate, right? I think I got that right.
Certainly. It's Crispy Mate on all platforms. You can find me on Twitch, YouTube. I post every day, stream most parts of the week. So find me many times there.
I think you got to get into that storm chasing game just now because of this.
Right, exactly. I will, I think.
Thank you so much, Christian. Yeah, I mean, that's a great example, Tim, of, some of those safety tips we give. And, occasionally when we say those, people will think we're crazy. And the bathtub thing always throws people for a loop. And I remember only other event that I can remember that's crazy, I remember a toilet blowing up in Florida somewhere when their plumbing got hit by lightning. And it was one of those, like, mind-blowing things where people are like, yeah, your plumbing can get hit, and this is a good example of electricity going into a gamer as well.
Mom's always right. That's what Christian just told us. So.
Yeah, I love that he said that. Mom and grandmas are right. Well, thanks again for joining us tonight. That was a great segment. Stick around. We've got more news coming up on WCNC Plus and WFMY Plus.
Tom, can you hear me? I'm great, thank you so much. We will do a quick toss and then we'll start the interview if that works for you, about 30 seconds out. And can I get your cam on whenever you should be able to see us shortly? Oh, all good. I love your background.
Starting our 7 to 9 Impact stream inside our Impact studio here on WCNC Plus. I'm Colin Mayfield. Jeb Goldman is here. We've got a special guest here, Tom Mayo, who's in charge of the league's cup, previewing Charlotte FC's match against FC Juarez and what fans should expect. Jeb, you're the MLS guy amongst the two of us. I'll let you take over here.
Thank you, Colin. Yeah, we have Thomas Mayo joining, just like you said. Thomas, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. You're the executive director of the League's Cup, and Charlotte FC fans are familiar with the League's Cup, but maybe not this year's version. Can you, before we get into any kind of questions, can you just break down what makes this year's competition different than the one that the team, to a lot of fans' beliefs, underperformed last year?
Okay, thanks for having me on, and good evening. Look, the tournament this year, slight revamp. What we've done is we focused in on the rivalry, the MLS versus Liga MX, the soccer league from Mexico and the soccer league from the USA. We focused in on that, and we said, okay, 93% of games, all Phase 1 games, up to and including the quarterfinals, will all be against those two leagues head to head. So that's what's new this year.
That's fantastic. I mean, I grew up as an MLS fan. Ever since I was 5 years old, I was watching San Jose Quakes games at the Buckshot Stadium, and there was always the question among my friends and I, which league was better. We had a lot of Chivas fans growing up. Chivas USA was a thing down in Los Angeles, so there was always that rivalry as well. So now being able to see it in this new form, where essentially you have dozens of matchups between both leagues, I think everyone's interested in. We saw round one yesterday, very, very close games. The game that I watched last night was San Diego Pachuca, Irving Lozano, Chucky Lozano taking on his former club. That ended up being an amazing game. Set the stage for what Charlotte FC fans can expect against FC Juarez. Two relatively new teams, a lot of stars on the field. What should fans look out for?
Look, it's an electric 90 minutes because we don't go to extra time. It culminates in penalties. So if it's a draw, it's going to go to penalties. And so that made our opening night. You would have seen the PKs that were happening, and it was all on the line. That can happen as well if it goes to a draw. So an exciting opening night. Each team is going to be wanting to take away as many points as possible because this Phase 3, they've got 3 matchups, like you said. So take away as many points as you can. If you can't do it in regular time, you've got to take them home in PKs.
Absolutely, and we saw some excellent penalty shootouts, to your point, last night. Some MLS clubs really showing, that is where they. But I think that what at least me as an MLS fan, that I was the most interested in is no MLS club took all 3 points yesterday. It was in penalties. It was after regulation. They were able to kind of take the better than a draw. Can Charlotte reverse the course? What do you think Charlotte needs to do to defeat FC Juarez?
Look, I think from an organizer's point of view, I think they've just got to, it's going to be a change of tempo. I think what we've recognized in that opening games is this is an international tournament. Okay, this isn't your regular MLS season, which is challenging enough. The style of play is different. The way they play is different. The supporters are different. So there's a whole step change in the way that they've got to perform. So it's just recognizing that in the squad briefings and everything else. So I think, look, it's a big challenge. There's for some players it could be their first international tournament, and it's noticeably different, not only on the pitch for the players but also for the fans in the stadium.
There's always been this idea that Liga MX has a greater intensity than Major League Soccer, that the actual caliber of competition is higher. And some games, I think the Houston Dynamo would probably agree with that after their round one. But MLS has grown significantly. They've had success in the CONCACAF Champions League. They've had some success. They looked all right during the FIFA Club World Cup, which we hosted some games here in Charlotte. Do you think that's still true, that the intensity in Liga MX is that much greater, or has MLS really rose to the challenge thus far, but last year and this year?
Look, I think last night we saw that everyone rose to the challenge. Everyone was like, look at the emotion that was on the field. I mean, it was really intense. So look, MLS in its 30th year, it's come on so much. It's grown so quick in this global game. But the intensity was there for both teams last year. So you can't say one is more than the other, because I tell you what, that was a true international tournament yesterday. It was incredible to watch.
And I think a lot of fans here in Charlotte, myself included, aren't as familiar with Liga MX. The games are not as easy to watch in the United States. Sometimes we'll have them on FS1, but we don't get to see as much of the league as we'd like. Who are some of the star players that we can expect between FC Juarez, Monterrey, when Chivas come? What are some of the big names that you think fans should be keeping an eye out, and Charlotte FC should be keeping in their back pocket?
Yeah, I think, look, the rosters are going to be announced. The rosters have been announced, but obviously the coaches are going to be announcing their lineups as well. I think Sergio Canales is quite an interesting one for Monterrey. We saw that come through in the All-Star game. So you've got, one of the greats of European soccer's come over to Monterrey, and that's going to be in your third game. So look, let's stand by, wait to see whether the coaches are calling up. But yeah, you're going to have it's going to be challenging. They've got some incredible teams to play against.
Yeah, I know we're all very excited here in Charlotte. Speaking of Spaniards crossing the pond and doing great work here in CONCACAF, we have Pep Biel, who has been on a tear despite an MLS All-Star snub. I believe he is in the MVP running. I personally have a little bit of a bias. What do you think Pep Biel needs to do to combine with Inan Toklamati and Wilfred Zaha to make Charlotte, the most dangerous team on the field for their match tomorrow?
I think what's important is that they need to study the opposition, right? They need to look at the opposition. They need to play the prior reels. They need to do their homework, because you'll see the different style of play that comes out. And so I think also with the temperatures and with the field conditions, I think everybody's got to start to understand the opposition, because it's not like regular MLS season where they've played them before and it's consecutive histories. This is new. This is new rivalries, and I think that's what's going to make it a big challenge.
All right, and this is a question for me personally, but I am very curious. Outside of Charlotte FC, we know all three matches that we're guaranteed will all be fantastic. What are some other matchups that you see in this first round? I know Inter Miami have a great one today where they're going to be hopefully introducing Rodrigo De Paul, fingers crossed, another all-star potentially in the league. What are some matches that you as the director are hoping that folks are tuning into when they kick off?
Look, we're spoilt for choice. I mean, 54 matches across this phase one, whether it's from California all the way through to New York. I mean, you've got some great games. You've got Red Bull Chivas kicking off tomorrow night. You've got Cruz Azul versus LA Galaxy on the weekend. You've got San Diego Tigres. You've got, it's just back to back. And then you've got your three games against Juarez, Chivas, and closing it out with Monterrey. So, look, it's just non-stop action for the next 10 days. So if you can't buy a ticket, tune in on MLS Season Pass or find one of our linear partners. It'd be great.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I speak for all soccer fans in the United States when I say we are very excited for this revamped tournament, and even more excited for us here in Charlotte to be a part of it. An absolute blessing, and cannot wait to see how we stack up against some of the best. Tom, before I let you go, is there anything you think the fans or folks here in Charlotte should know before tuning in tomorrow night?
Look, thank you very much. Look, really appreciate your support. It's all on the line. Get behind your local team. Like you said, if you can't go down and buy tickets and get into the stadium, please feel free to jump on MLS Apple Season TV Pass and tune in and watch some great games. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'm sure if Charlotte FC's entire history is anything to go by, there will be a packed stadium tomorrow and a packed stadium for every game. Tom, thank you so much. We're looking forward to hearing more from you and more about the tournament as it goes on. Hopefully a late run. And when we get you on next year, it'll be Charlotte FC on your background.
Thank you very much. See you then.
Have a good one. All right, very exciting stuff. Very exciting. Cannot wait to see what Charlotte brings. I'll send it over to my anchor, Colin Mayfield, for the rest of the news.
Man, look at you. You're like your own little expert over there. Man, you have so much history to call back on. That's good to hear, and the excitement to see was awesome. I think a lot of folks, FC Charlotte or Charlotte FC, obviously looking ahead to the game with FC Juarez. So we'll see where it goes. A great little bite of information from both our guys there. We are now going to go to here on Impact News. President Trump, who delivered remarks from the White House just this afternoon on the administration's new Making Health Technology Great Again initiative. So they're calling it, and they're kind of saying that this is securing commitments from more than 60 health and information technology companies to participate in a plan to make Medicare patient data more accessible. We talked a little bit about this in our 3 o'clock show here on WCNC Plus. So giving you more information on this now.
And we have a lot of great people here, and we've been looking forward to this day, but we sort of look forward to every day because we have a lot of surprises, most of which are good. Today you saw GDP was much higher than anticipated, and Scott, good job. Scott Bessent's been working, just got back from a little excursion and a meeting with China in Europe, and that went well. We've done very well with the EU deal. It's a very big deal, I guess. They say the biggest trade deal ever made by far, probably is. Just completed Japan and many other countries, and hundreds of billions of dollars is flowing into our country. We've never seen anything even close. And that's not me saying it, that's everybody saying it. And it's going to be something really, really very special. Maybe even more importantly, factories for AI and for cars and for lots of other things are being built in this country or planned to be built very shortly. They'll be starting. And where they need great amounts of energy, like for AI, they're going to be, I've given them approval. And Lee Zeldin has given them very fast approval to build their own electric powering plants, and they'll build them with the factory, so we don't have to worry about an ancient grid and all of the other problems, the obstacles people thought we were going to have that would make it impossible. And we're leading AI by a lot, and I think people are very impressed with our country. As they said, the King of Saudi Arabia and various leaders, and just about every leader I can even imagine. We were in the Middle East and Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia. They said, 1 year ago, your country was dead, and today you have the hottest country anywhere in the world, and that's true. So I congratulate everybody in the room that's helped, but we're doing a good job together. I'd like to begin by saying a few words about the unbelievable kind of numbers that we've been putting up. And as I said, the number of 3%, the pace in the second quarter, we smashed all expectations. They thought it would be maybe a little bit less than 2, and it was 3, a little bit more than 3. Consumer spending is up, business investment is way up, domestic manufacturing is way up, real disposable family income is up, and personal savings are up. Other than that, we're not doing so great. We have the hottest country, and I'll tell you, it's a great, we're having a lot of fun with it. At the same time, we dramatically slashed government spending for the second quarter in a row, down nearly 4%, which people were surprised at. We do a lot of cutting also. The private sector has boomed with nearly 600,000 jobs added, way above expectations, while we have reduced the federal workforce by 70,000 jobs. So these are private jobs that are coming back to our country. Federal jobs are being cut. Critics said that our tariffs would hurt the economy, but the data shows the exact opposite, and the exact opposite is happening. The U.S. Treasury has taken in $150 billion from tariffs, and we'll be adding about $200 billion next month for totals that nobody's ever seen before, frankly. And foreign imports were down 30% in the second quarter, while the domestic auto production surged by a stunning 36%. How about that number, Dr. Oz, right? That's good. That's good. We want to do that with your patients, too. We'll have a very healthy, we're going to have a very healthy country. At the same time, inflation continues to fall faster than expectations, and for the fifth consecutive month, core inflation was lower than predicted substantially. This is truly the dawn of the golden age of America. That's what we're in. We want to keep it that way. This afternoon, we're gathered to announce another historic victory for the American people, very important one. Today, the dream of easily transportable electronic medical records finally becomes a reality. I want to thank Secretary Scott Bessent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for joining us, as well as Administrator of the Centers for Medicine and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, all friends of mine. White House AI and crypto czar David Sachs, and Acting Administrator of DOGE, Amy Gleason, all here. And we have various great senators here. Senator Round, Senator Cassidy, thank you very much for being here and helping out. I also want to thank representatives from Apple, Google, Samsung, Amazon, OpenAI, Anthropic, Epic, Oracle, Athena, Health, Noom, and that's not a bad group of people. Wow. And they're the top people. We don't play games. You know, when you invite people to the White House, the top ones, that's a big net worth sitting in this room right now. Boy, oh boy, we better make sure the room is nice and safe. It's half the net worth of our country. I'm also grateful to be joined by numerous congressmen. I'm not going to name you if you don't mind. I'll probably never get their vote again, but it's too many. Thank you very much for being here. The Congress has been great. Senators have been great, and the congressmen and women have been great. We just passed the most important, I think, look, I can't say most important, but certainly one of the most, but the most consequential and the largest bill in the history of Congress. And I call it the great, big, beautiful bill. We call it different names, but it all means the same thing. For decades, America's healthcare networks have been overdue for a high-tech upgrade, and that's what we're doing. The existing systems are often slow, costly, and incompatible with one another. But with today's announcement, we take a major step to bring healthcare into the digital age, something that is absolutely vital. You got to do it. Moving from clipboards and fax machines into a new era of convenience, profitability, and speed, and frankly, better health for people. Under the leadership of Administrator Oz, we're officially launching the CMS Digital Health Tech ecosystem to give healthcare providers, insurers, and software companies the tools they need to empower Americans with a 21st century experience on health. The key breakthrough we've made is getting many of the biggest names in the healthcare and technology to agree to industry-wide standards for electronic medical records. All of those great companies that you just heard have gotten together with this group of very brilliant people. I don't know who's more brilliant, them or them. I don't know. Could be them. I hate to tell you. It could very well be them. But I don't know. I'm going to take my team. But the key breakthrough we've made is getting many of the biggest names in healthcare and technology to agree to that those standards of electronic medical records that we talk about and you've heard about for so many years, and now it's happening. This will allow patients to easily transmit information from one doctor to another, even if they're different networks and using different record-keeping systems. No matter what system they use, they're all transferable. The new standards will also make it simple for patients to access their own personal health records. I don't want to see mine, please. I don't want to see. I don't know about you. They have all sorts of things, sir. They can tell you exactly what your problem is going to be in 6 years. We can do it. You know, they have all these different things. I don't know if they work or not, but I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear it. If I got a problem, I don't want to know about it right now. But it is amazing what they're doing, I don't know, does it actually work? Can they do that? All right, well, then I'm glad I said I don't want to know. But thanks to this announcement, healthcare providers across the country will also finally be able to kill the clipboard. It's an expression that's used, capital, with a capital C, kill the clipboard. Instead of filling out the same tedious paperwork at every medical appointment, patients will simply be able to grant their doctors access to their records at the push of a button. Just a button and you're all set, and all the information the doctor needs will be immediately transmitted. The system will be entirely opt-in, and there will be no centralized government-run database, which everyone is always concerned about. I'm less concerned than anybody. I say whatever it is. But people are very, very concerned about the personal records. They want to keep them very quiet, and that's their choice. I think it's a great thing because it'll be absolutely quiet. Instead, doctors and patients will always remain in control. The benefits to millions of Americans will be enormous. We will save time, we will save money, and most importantly, we'll save lives. It's just going to make people live longer and be a lot healthier. I think that's really what you're looking to do. And now I'd like to ask Secretary Kennedy to say a few words, followed by David Sachs, Dr. Oz, and Amy Gleason. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I just want to begin by making a comment that is irrelevant to what we're gathered here today to talk about. But I've been coming to this building for 65 years, and I have to say that it's never looked better. I've spent some time in the Oval Office, which really it's been transformed. And I was looking at a picture of the Oval Office the other day when I was there, when I was a kid with my uncle. And, you know, it was extraordinary. It's always extraordinary to go into that sacred space. But I have to say that it looked kind of drab in the pictures. And they were black and white pictures, but it looked drab. And it looks the opposite of drab today. And I think, I know all these portraits, I hope you get a chance to look at them when you go out there, that they were handpicked for the president. And many of them hijacked from other agencies that were trying to keep them. But I mean, you know, my uncle, my aunt, Jackie, who were deeply committed to design, to beauty, and who understood that it's important to have our public buildings be beautiful because it inspires us, it elevates the human spirit. It's one of the, it is a template, it's an example, an exemplar for democracy, the releasing through freedoms of the creativity of the human spirit. And this building, of all buildings, should look beautiful. And under your stewardship, it looks extraordinary today. So thank you, Mr. President, for that. About 3 weeks ago, I met with the Indonesian health minister. And Indonesia today is regarded as the highest flourishing nation on earth. Since 1990, it has increased the lifespan of its women by 8 years, of its men by 9 years. There's no country that has a record like that. And there are two major innovations that allowed them to achieve that extraordinary outcome. And one of those was to disincentivize people from eating processed foods. Oh, you are paid not to eat processed foods, and you are penalized for eating processed foods. The other innovation that really transformed Indonesia was allowing people control of their individual health records. He showed me the app that they use that everybody in Indonesia has. And it shows your height, your weight, your blood type, your BMI, your cardiac markers, your diabetes markers, your cholesterol, and any kind of individualized treatments that you've had. So if you go to a doctor in another town, he doesn't do what we have to do here, which is to sit there with a clipboard and a fax machine. in order to get your health records. It's available, and it allows them to give better treatment. It also allows you to make better choices over your life. And there's other apps like Yucca in Indonesia that allow you to choose good foods when you go to the grocery store. So you can turn your app on your phone and you can get full information of those foods. Well, now if you have your medical records, you can get personalized advice. And that app will also give you advice about a better alternative. So we're going to be able to, we met, Dr. Oz and I met with the former Prime Minister Rudd of Australia just before, just after the election during the transition phase. And he, after his retirement as Prime Minister, he ran a commission to reorganize the Australian health system, and they revolutionized it, and they vastly improved health in Australia. And he said the single thing that he did that was most important to that transformation was the transparency that occurs when people control their own health records. Because it gives people the choice over their own health decisions and over their own lives, and it gives them a sense of responsibility and allows them to measure the interventions if they change their diet, if they change their exercise. It can show you how many steps you took today. It can tell you if your glucose is spiking. And all of that information will now be available to American citizens. 60 years ago today, we passed Medicaid and Medicare in this country. And we have 60 CEOs in this room of these extraordinary companies, some of which the president just mentioned, that have all agreed voluntarily to start sharing information. President Trump, during his first term, passed the interoperability rule. And it was intended to do this. For 20 years, the federal government has been trying to do this. Everybody recognizes it's absolutely critical innovation for us advancing the health of American citizens, to give them responsibility and to give them control over their own healthcare choices. And unfortunately, you ran out of time the last time around. President Trump gave us instructions that he wanted this to happen within 6 months. We barely made it under the wire thanks to Dr. Oz's leadership. And within 6 months, every American's going to be doing it thanks to the cooperation of the corporate leaders in this room. You know, about 3 months ago, I met with the food executives, and I asked them to voluntarily come forward and get rid of food dyes, of the 9 synthetic petroleum dyes. And this is something, again, the government, Democrats and Republicans have been trying to do for 20 years. And the industry came forward, and now 40% of the food industry in this country has taken the pledge to remove food dyes from all of their foods. That happened because of your leadership, Mr. President. A month ago, we got, after a lot of work by Chris Klump and Dr. Oz and a lot of other people in our agency, we got all the insurance executives to come together in our country and in our offices and agree to get rid of pre-authorization for 80% of the DSM codes. This is a voluntary agreement. 80% of the industry has now agreed to do that. So this is happening because of good leadership. President Trump, you've asked us to think big, you've inspired us to dream big, and you've enabled us to accomplish things that no other president has been able to do. So I want to thank you for your leadership, for allowing this to happen, and with your leadership, we're going to make America healthy again. Now I want to introduce my friend, my colleague, the crypto czar, the acting administrator of Doge, David Sachs.
Thank you, Secretary Kennedy. I recently got a text message from a friend whose wife has been suffering from a chronic illness for something like a decade, and they've been trying to figure out what it is. They've never been able to figure it out. And I just want to read this to you right off my phone. He said, I uploaded my wife's blood work into one of our leading AI engines on Friday. It essentially diagnosed her as having a rare genetic defect that causes bone marrow failure. It's caused every single thing that's happened to her. She has every single symptom. It started at exactly at the same age of presentation. It's 10 people out of 1 million. There's absolutely no way this is not it. So wow, it's really an incredible example of what AI is already able to do just today, and we're just getting started. And this was one person putting his wife's data in one of our consumer AI apps, and he's already been able to get that diagnosis, and that's going to help them tremendously. The key is the unlocking of the data, because the more data that AI has, the better it performs. And so, kudos to Dr. Oz and Secretary Kennedy for this pledge today. They were able to get 60 major companies across different sectors of the economy to agree to unlock their data so that AI can use it to drive better patient outcomes. And this is, all due to your leadership and President Trump's leadership to put the American people's healthcare needs first. And I remember Dr. Oz, he was one of the first people to call me during the transition when the president announced I'd be AI czar, because he wanted to ask me about how AI could better be used in healthcare. So kudos to you, Dr. Oz. Your passion's really incredible. And kudos to you, Secretary Kennedy, your passion as well. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was a big fan of Bobby Kennedy when he was running as a Democrat. And I remember thinking,
Gave a lot more money than President Trump.
well, I remember thinking there's this one problem with Bobby Kennedy. He's not a Republican. But thanks to President Trump, I think we fixed that. So, and I think that, getting people like Dr. Oz and Bobby Kennedy into the administration is a testament to President Trump and the talent that he's able to attract and pull together, and the partnerships that he's able to forge, because these are people who could be doing other things. So it's really a testament to the great talent that President Trump always attracts around him. Today's pledge by these companies is going to tear down barriers that allows both startups and established firms to compete freely. We're opening up the playing field so that the best tools can scale, compete on value, and discover new methods for making Americans healthy again. Technologies like AI, they do things like they will expand access to care, cut administrative costs, reduce fraud, and deliver better results for patients and doctors. And I want to thank you, President Trump, for your promise to not only make Americans healthy again, but also to ensure that America is a predominant AI superpower. Just last week, you announced a major AI action plan with hundreds of billions of dollars of new investment in AI infrastructure, and also getting red tape out of the way so that we can be the leading country in AI. And it's these life-saving applications that are going to be built on top of all of that infrastructure. So thank you for your leadership in making the United States the #1 country in AI.
David, thank you.
And now, Dr. Oz, we'll take it from
Mr. President, today we are making American health technology remarkably great again. We've always been at the leadership. David's right. I called him early on after the president offered me the position, and him as well. And we began brainstorming on this. Secretary Kennedy, from day one, appreciated the crisis that we're in and how we needed to address it. So today is a remarkably important day, one that you will remember, I believe, for years to come, for 3 reasons. Yes, it is the 60th birthday of Medicare and Medicaid. The first patient, by the way, was Harry S. Truman. Although Lyndon Johnson signed the legislation 60 years ago today, not far from here. It is not just the ability to bring 60 of the top incumbents and insurgents in health technology, hospital systems, insurance companies, electronic medical record companies, AI companies, the big players. You're all here, and we appreciate that very much. But, Mr. President, you used the power to convene. That's fundamentally what I think the president has been able to offer us. And Secretary Kennedy offered us, as a group, some examples, but there are more to come. And I want to touch on some of these. But first, I've got to do what doctors often have to do, which is to tell you the truth, even if you don't want to hear it. So here goes. These beautiful programs, which are the backbone of the social network, the social support system of this country, the safety net, they're flailing. They're flailing for a bunch of reasons. Medicaid is a unique entity. It has deviated from its original purpose by drift and by design. The One Big Beautiful Bill, the OB3 law, was elegant for that very reason. And President, I don't know if you remember this, I can share this, but he called me once and he was upset at me because I was going too strident at something. And he said, this is about fraud, waste, and abuse. That's what we're interested in doing. And that's exactly what the One Big Beautiful Bill accomplished. And it especially did it to save Medicaid. by putting $200 billion more dollars into it and allocating funds very specifically to use to support rural America. And primarily, some of that money will be used to support digital infrastructure, which is terribly lacking in many parts of the country. The money that's sent from Washington doesn't get to rural America. About 7% of Medicaid dollars get to rural hospitals. We now have an ability to infuse funds through this $50 billion Rural Health Transformation Fund into that system. The gathering today is another example of how we can actually jumpstart that and accelerate it. The other reality is COVID broke the system. It did for many reasons. Medicaid expenses went up 50% in 5 years. Medicare, the trust fund that we met at actually Treasury with Secretary Bessent and Secretary Kennedy as trustees, it goes bankrupt in 2033, and that is actually a conservative estimate. It could go bankrupt as early as 2029. Thankfully, due to the economy, that's not going to happen. But we don't want to have to take that risk, and there's some fundamental changes we need to make accordingly. Now, there's one other big reality about making the system more efficient, which is why what everyone here is talking about is so critical. And let's just pick an average American born in 1964. That average American born in 64 will retire this year at age 61. If just that one group of people born in 64 could work 3 years longer because they're healthy, because they feel like they want to do it, because they feel vital and vigorous and they're flourishing, just that 1 year working longer is $1 trillion to the U.S. GDP, and it's $300 billion of tax revenue to pay for a lot of the problems that people are concerned about. So it's not just keeping people out of the hospital, getting them to thrive and flourish that makes what we're doing so critical today. I think there are a lot of realities to how healthcare has gone. Unfortunately, this system is frozen, and it has been for many reasons, despite efforts in the first administration. It's frozen in time, so it cannot address the quality lags that exist. While Netflix and Airbnb and Uber drivers are racing ahead, making arrangements, identifying the problems that are challenging us in healthcare have become incredibly difficult. You can't make appointments. The average Americans are tired. They're tired of waiting for a doctor's appointment. They're tired of waiting for the surprise of what your hospital bill is going to offer. That's being addressed by one of the president's executive orders. They're tired of waiting for access to their medical records. You own your medical records. They're yours. Why you can't have access to them is a stunning reality in modern day America. They're also tired of waiting for Washington to take action. And this president early on emphatically stated that wasn't going to happen anymore. And today we made that vision into a reality. And there's a fine line between vision and hallucination. What you did today was show it's a vision, because you share it with us and we're moving ahead on it. And that's what today's commitments essentially are reflecting. And they are pledges, they're not laws, they're nimble and they're fast and they're quick, because the president understands that you, each of you in your own way, understand these needs. And Secretary Kennedy spoke beautifully about the reality of what happens when you actually have electronic records, because what he said is happening in Indonesia, we'll have here. Within a year, on your device, and 91% of Medicaid patients have smartphones. On this device, you'll get insights based on your records if you want. You don't have to take this, but if you desire, Amy Gleason is one of the smartest people I've ever worked with, has built a mechanism to be able to get you that information in a way with all these partners helping, so that you can get nudged to pay attention to what you're eating and avoid processed foods that Secretary Kennedy smartly and wisely highlighted as so dangerous to our well-being. All of this, by the way, is that will be at the fingertips. In addition, advice about which doctor to see, when to go see them, nudges, reminding you why I didn't do certain things. If you're a doctor like me, it's a very different story. It's to help you navigate the system better. It's giving you advice, decision support, which is becoming increasingly important as medicine gets more difficult. But I'll tell you the best thing of all, how many of you have been with your doctor telling them something heartfelt, very emotional, and they're looking to the side, typing into their computer, right? It's common. Put your hands up. I just want to see it. Yeah, most everybody. And that's unfortunate, because the whole sacrament, the whole covenant of being with the doctor is having them look you in the eyes and realize you're there for each other. That process is going to go away. We will, within the workflow of doctors, be able, with your help, allow physicians to take care of patients, gather the information while they're doing it, and will destroy the upcoding that has hurt Medicare Advantage and other programs in a similar fashion. The IT infrastructure that's going to change promises to improve a lot of things. We're going to cut fraud, waste, and abuse. Mr. President, we announced with the DOJ 2 weeks ago a $15 billion bust. $15 billion. It's a multinational criminal syndicate based primarily, we believe, in the Soviet Union, in Russia, And what they did was hack using beneficiary numbers into the system. We'll be able to stop that because of a system that Amy has put together and the wonderful work of Amy Brandt, who has a fraud war room using this kind of technology, because we'll know who you are and who your doctor is. We can block this. We're going to have remarkable advances in how consumers can use their own records. We'll have beneficiaries be able to get MAHA advice and prevention tips and even be able to nudge them and reward them perhaps for that. And all this comes back to one fundamental issue, Mr. President, which is leadership. I think 60 people, the biggest, the best, the willing, came forward because of your leadership, because you weren't going to take no for an answer, and you know it. We are building a robust and safe, I emphasize that, safe system. It's going to protect the data better than we could have imagined. We're going to be able to accomplish goals that all of us wished from day one that would be in place. These pledges are now confirmed. They're signed in public. And you have therefore empowered Americans to own their property, which is their medical records. Let me introduce Amy Gleason. She is acting director of DOJ, U.S. Digital Service as well, and was actually the brilliant woman who pulled together the pieces of this puzzle with so many members of the audience. Amy Gleason.
Good afternoon. First, I would like to thank President Trump for his leadership in this area, and Secretary Kennedy and Administrator Oz for driving this work with clarity and urgency. I would also like to thank my colleagues who have been instrumental to this, and we've worked a lot of late nights and hard times on this, and it would not have been possible without them. I want to start today with my daughter Morgan, who's here in the audience. If you'd please stand up. I am so inspired and energized by your strength every day. And we also have two other patients here, Randy and Tom, who have been very inspiring. Thank you for being here today. You're why this all matters. Let me start talking about my daughter's history. So 15 years ago, she was diagnosed with a rare disease. She was 11 years old, and she started showing mysterious symptoms. Over the last year and a half after that, she saw the country's best doctors, but she still continued to get worse. At some point, she couldn't stand up off the floor or walk up the stairs, and we still had no answers. I carried a binder of paper records to every doctor's appointment so that I could keep them aligned. And I truly believe that if one of those doctors had been able to see her whole history, they would have diagnosed her faster. And if we had just had today's AI, then they could have connected the dots that the humans missed. Today, Morgan takes 21 pills a day, gets 2 infusions a month, and has over 40 patient portals. Her disease is very rare, but her experience is very common. And that is what we're here to fix today. Too many patients are forced to remember all the doctors that they've been to and log into portal after portal, repeating their story at every visit, and they don't have the digital tools to help them stay well. Meanwhile, every other part of our life is digital. I can order groceries and have them delivered in minutes. I get personalized recommendations on my other apps. But in healthcare, we still see it on paper and manual situations. But today, thanks to President Trump, we're changing that. Over 15 years, we've tried to regulate our way to a better outcome. And we have gotten a path forward, but they have not delivered the modern healthcare experience that Americans expect and deserve. I'm so proud today that these 60 companies have voluntarily stepped forward to make a pledge, to take action, and to join us, to say, we're ready. Let's fix this. We're in. We're trying something different. It's not regulation or rulemaking. This is a voluntary alignment around a shared vision, a commitment to work across boundaries, across competitors, and across silos. We're bringing together data sharing networks, electronic medical records, doctors, health systems, payers, and app developers. And we're asking one simple question: what can we do right now to make this work for patients? The companies pledging today are agreeing to collaborate, even with their direct competitors, because they know we can't keep kicking the can down the road. We have to stop talking about data interoperability and make the data flow. Here's something important. Not all patients will want these tools. Some will rely on their caregivers, and others will rely on their doctors, so they don't have to carry it themselves. But no matter how people engage, we must make sure it works for everyone. CMS is doing its part. We're clearing the path for innovation by building the long overdue National Provider Directory, a kind of digital map for healthcare that connects systems in real time and helps patients get more coordinated care. We're also modernizing Medicare.gov to feel more seamless and smart like other apps we use. But the government can't do this and shouldn't do it alone. These tools we need to make daily decisions must come from the private sector, and that's why this is so important. So let me tell you what this might look like after our collaborative effort. So Morgan, in 6 months from now, might show up to her doctor's appointment, and instead of filling out a clipboard with her 21 medications, 12 doctors, and her entire medical history, she can just pull out her phone and tap or scan a QR code and seamlessly transfer her digital insurance card, her verified medical record, and a digital summary that could help her provider get up to speed faster. We call this kill the clipboard, as President Trump said. After the visit, Morgan opens her AI assistant, a tool that she has authorized to access her records, and asks, what did the doctor say today? What did these results mean? What should I watch for now? And the assistant responds using her actual health history, explains her care plan in plain language, helps her track her symptoms, and even schedules follow-up visits if she needs them. And lastly, she has a new favorite app that helps her manage her chronic conditions. Because for years, Morgan has said what other patients say, I only see a doctor a few days a year, but I live with this disease every day. Today, we're starting with apps that can support patients 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. They don't replace doctors, they just fill in the gap between visits so that care is continuous and not episodic. So what makes this effort different? Today, we have all these apps that want to provide these services, but they can't get the data because it is so hard for patients to access their records. But today, we have 18 network companies who are here pledging to fix the infrastructure that makes this possible. They're doing this through modern data sharing networks that removes the burden on patients and providers and makes it available in real time using modern identity, just like when you check in at the airport. These honor patient privacy and transparency, and most importantly, it's a movement to work together to remove the friction that's holding us back. Because access to information shouldn't be a luxury, it should be a standard. So for all the Morgans out there, come join this movement with us at cms.gov. Let's kill the clipboard and axe the facts. Let's help make health tech great again. Or in this case, maybe it's for the first time. Thank you, President Trump.
Thank you very much. That was great. And hello. You look very, very healthy to me. You look really great. So just, I want to thank all of the companies that are here. These are big names, great people. And now you're doing something that's so important for our country, really for the world. It's beyond our country, I suspect. It's really for the world. So just keep it up. And you've hit new highs almost virtually every day for the last few months. And that makes your job probably a little bit easier. You're under very little stress. But someday you might have a little bit, but you're not going to have much. I think we're really going to great heights. But I just want to thank everybody, political people and the teachers and the companies and all of our cabinet. I even see Newt. Do I see Newt? I see Newt. Look at him. He's such a handsome man. He's a healthy man. We don't have to do any tests on him. But good to see you, Newt. But I just want to thank everybody. This is a very big undertaking, and it's a very serious undertaking. It's going to make a lot of people lead a much better life. Thank you all very much for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, some interesting comments there about the plan to make Medicare patient data more accessible. Some reassurances there by the president and his secretary. There's been a lot of going back and forth between the president and the Fed chair, obviously on interest rates. And the central bank and its policymakers today voted 9-2 to hold interest rates steady as they have been for a couple of months now, keeping its benchmark interest rate between 4.25% and 4.5%. So obviously, we know the president has been very vocal about that and wanting interest rates to come down. Here is the Fed Chair Jerome Powell on his decision earlier today.
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Despite elevated uncertainty, the economy is in a solid position. The unemployment rate remains low, and the labor market is at or near maximum employment. Inflation has been running somewhat above our 2% longer-run objective. In support of our goals, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged. We believe that the current stance of monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments. I will have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that growth of economic activity has moderated. GDP rose at a 1.2% pace in the first half of this year, down from 2.5% last year. Although the increase in the second quarter was stronger at 3%, focusing on the first half of the year helps smooth through the volatility in the quarterly figures related to the unusual swings in net exports. The moderation in growth largely reflects a slowdown in consumer spending. In contrast, business investment in equipment and intangibles picked up from last year's pace. Activity in the housing sector remains weak. In the labor market, conditions have remained solid. Payroll job gains averaged 150,000 per month over the past 3 months. The unemployment rate at 4.1% remains low and has stayed in a narrow range over the past year. Wage growth has continued to moderate while still outpacing inflation. Overall, a wide set of indicators suggests that conditions in the labor market are broadly in balance and consistent with maximum employment. Inflation has eased significantly from its highs in mid-2022, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer-run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.5% over the 12 months ending in June, and that, excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.7%. These readings are little changed from the beginning of the year, although the underlying composition of price changes has shifted. Services inflation has continued to ease, while increased tariffs are pushing up prices in some categories of goods. Near-term measures of inflation expectations have moved up on balance over the course of this year on news about tariffs, as reflected in both market-based and survey-based measures. Beyond the next year or so, however, most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. At today's meeting, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 4.25% to 4.5%, and to continue reducing the size of our balance sheet. We will continue to determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. Changes to government policies continue to evolve, and their effects on the economy remain uncertain. Higher tariffs have begun to show through more clearly to prices of some goods, but their overall effects on economic activity and inflation remain to be seen. A reasonable base case is that the effects on inflation could be short-lived, reflecting a one-time shift in the price level. But it is also possible that the inflationary effects could instead be more persistent, and that is a risk to be assessed and managed. Our obligation is to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored and to prevent a one-time increase in the price level from becoming an ongoing inflation problem. For the time being, we're well positioned to learn more about the likely course of the economy and the evolving balance of risks before adjusting our policy stance. We see our current policy stance as appropriate to guard against inflation risks. We're also attentive to risks on the employment side of our mandate. In coming months, we will receive a good amount of data that will help inform our assessment of the balance of risks and the appropriate setting of the federal funds rate. At this meeting, the committee continued its discussions as part of our 5-year review of our monetary policy framework. We focused on potential revisions to our statement on longer-run goals and monetary policy strategy, and are on track to wrap up any modifications by late summer. The Fed has been assigned 2 goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable prices. We remain committed to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation sustainably to our 2% goal, and keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. we at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Chair Powell. There's a lot of lean in the markets, and not to mention out of the administration for a rate cut now in September. Is that expectation unrealistic at this point?
So, as you know, today we decided to leave our policy rate where it's been, where I would characterize as modestly restrictive. Inflation is running a bit above 2%, as I mentioned, even excluding tariff effects. The labor market's solid, historically low unemployment. Financial conditions are accommodative, and the economy is not performing as though restrictive policy were holding it back inappropriately. So it seems to me and to almost the whole committee that the economy is not performing as though restrictive policy is holding it back inappropriately, and modestly restrictive policy seems appropriate. All that said, there's also downside risk to the labor market. In coming months, we'll receive a good amount of data that will help inform our assessment of the balance of risks and the appropriate setting of the federal funds rate.
So just to follow up, by coming months, does that include the possibility you'll be getting essentially 2 rounds of jobs and inflation data between now and the September meeting? Is that potentially adequate to make a decision to lower rates at that point?
So you're right. We do have, this is an intermeeting period when we'll get 2 full rounds of employment and inflation data before the time of the September meeting. We have made no decisions about September. We don't do that in advance. We'll be taking that information into consideration and all the other information we get as we make our decision at the September meeting.
Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You took out the word or the notion that uncertainty has diminished from this statement. Does that mean uncertainty has increased? And I'm just wondering, the administration has struck several deals with large trading partners where it seems like we now know what the rate is going to be. Does knowing that rate add to your certainty to change policy, or do you need to wait to see the economic effects?
So essentially, the statement in our statement about uncertainty reflects what's gone on since the last meeting. So at the time of the last meeting, uncertainty had moved down a little bit, but it was more or less even this time. So we took out, had diminished because it didn't diminish further. So there's not really much in that. And then your second question is, say again?
There have been several deals that have been struck, and now we seem to have an idea what the tariff rates are going to be with some of our large trading partners. Does that not add to the kind of certainty you might need, or is it you're waiting for the economic effects to show themselves?
No, I think we're still, you're right. It's been a very dynamic time for these trade negotiations, and lots and lots of events in the intermeeting period, but we're still a ways away from seeing where things settle down. We are clearly getting more and more information, and I think at this point, people's estimates, our estimates, outside estimates of the likely, effective level of tariffs is not moving around that much at this point. But at the same time, there are many uncertainties left to resolve. So yes, we are learning more and more. It doesn't feel like we're very close to the end of that process, and that's not for us to judge. But it feels like there's much more to come, as well, looking ahead.
Neil.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Neil Irwin with Axios. This morning we got a GDP report in which final domestic private purchases decelerated, slowest pace since 22. There was a weakness in the interest-sensitive sectors and residential investment, commercial structures. Are those not signs that monetary policy is a little too restrictive right now, given current economic conditions?
So the GDP and PDFP numbers came in pretty much right where we expected them to come in. You got to look at the whole picture. So certainly, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, economic activity data, GDP, private domestic final purchases, which we think is a narrower but better signal for future, for where the economy is going, has come down to a little better than 1%, 1.2%, I think, in the case of GDP for the first half, whereas it was 2.5% last year. So that has certainly come down. But if you look at the labor market, what you see is, by many, many statistics, the labor market is kind of still in balance. it's things like quits, job openings, and let alone the unemployment rate. They're all by many measures, very similar to where they were a year ago. So you do not see weakening in the labor market. You do see a slowing in job creation, but also a slowing in the supply of workers. So you've got a labor market that's in balance, albeit partially because both demand and supply for workers is coming down at the same pace, and that's why the unemployment rate has remained roughly stable, which is why I said we do see downside risk in the labor market. I mean, our two mandate variables, right, are inflation and maximum employment, stable prices and maximum employment, not so much growth. So the labor market looks solid. Inflation is above target, and even if you look through the tariff effects, we think it's still a bit above target, and that's why our stance is where it is. But as I mentioned, downside to the labor market are certainly apparent.
So on labor, given the fluid labor supply situation, is there a number for this jobs report we get on Friday that would look to you like equilibrium job growth?
The main number you have to look at now is the unemployment rate, because it's true that the demand for workers in the form of, let's call it, just say payroll jobs, that number has come down, but so has the break-even number, kind of in tandem. So, as long as that puts the labor market in balance. The fact that it's getting into balance due to declines in both supply and demand, though, I think it is suggestive of downside risk. So we of course, will be watching that carefully.
Thank you. Colby Smith with the New York Times. Two of your colleagues called for a quarter-point cut today, and I'm wondering what aspects of their argument were most compelling to you and how you're weighing their views against those on the committee who, as of the June forecast, were in the camp of the Fed holding interest rates steady for the remainder of the year. And just in terms of the June SEP in particular, is that still the best representation of where the core of the committee is?
So on the dissents, what you want from everybody and also from a dissenter is a clear explanation of what your thinking is and what are the arguments you're making, and we had that today. So I think basically this was quite a good meeting all around the table where people were thought carefully about this and put their positions out there. As I mentioned, the sort of the majority of the committee was of the view that inflation's a bit above target, maximum employment is at target. That calls for modestly restrictive, in my way of thinking, modestly restrictive stance of policy for now. But we had two dissenters who I think, you want that clear thinking and expression of your thinking, and we certainly had that today, I think all around the table. In terms of, you asked about the June SEP, I wouldn't, that you're right, that's what it says, and that may well, I couldn't point to it 6 weeks later as expressing people's thought. You really can't do that. We don't run an SEP, and I don't like to substitute in my own estimate of what the SEP might be. We don't have one. So I'll just say that, we haven't made any decisions about September. We'll be monitoring all the incoming data and asking ourselves whether the federal funds rate is in the right place.
And just on the point about policy being only modestly restrictive, does that mean that there's actually not much scope to reduce rates once the conditions for a cut are met, barring a significant weakening of the labor market?
So let me say, my own estimate is modestly restrictive, and there are a range of views of what the neutral rate is at this moment for our economy, and so others may say it's more restrictive or less restrictive even. We're going to be at some point, when we return to moving toward a more neutral stance, we'll be making that judgment as we go. I don't think we have a preset course. It's not so mechanical as saying, we've derived with great confidence the neutral rate and that is our destination, because really we understand that no one actually knows what the neutral rate is. We know it by its works, and that will be the way the economy reacts over time to, slightly looser policy.
Nick Timmeros, The Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, my question is about what have you learned over the last few months about the inflation generating and price pass-through process? And just to drill down, the June CPI report showed evidence of tariff-induced goods inflation. Now, the tariff landscape is only starting to be settled with some of these more recent deals. Given the lags between when tariffs are announced and when they show up in goods prices, is 2 months a long enough horizon to evaluate the impact and be confident that tariffs aren't impacting the broader inflation process?
I think you have to think of this as still quite early days. And so I think what we're seeing now is substantial amounts of tariff revenue being collected on the order of $30 billion a month, which is, substantially higher than before. And the evidence seems to be mostly not paid only to a small extent through exporters lowering their price, and companies or retailers, sort of people who are upstream, institutions that are upstream from the consumer, are paying most of this for now. Consumers it's starting to show up in consumer prices, as you know, in the June report. We expect to see more of that. And we know from surveys that companies feel that they have every intention of putting this through to the consumer, but the truth is they may not be able to in many cases. So I think we're just going to have to watch and learn empirically how much of this and over what period of time. I think we've learned that the process will probably be slower than expected at the beginning, but we never expected it to be fast. We think we have a long way to go to really understand exactly how it will be. So that's how we're thinking of it right now.
So if I could follow up, is the reticence to look through core goods inflation being driven by the judgment that during the pandemic expectations proved more adaptive than anyone at the Fed expected? Is it being driven by uncertainty over how restrictive policy is?
You could argue we are a bit looking through goods inflation by not raising rates. We haven't reacted to new inflation, but I mean I wouldn't insist upon that. But I don't think I think the base case, as I said, a reasonable base case is that these are one-time price effects. Of course, in the end, there will not be. This will not turn out to be inflation, because we'll make sure that it's not. We will, through our tools, make sure that this does not move from being a one-time price increase to serious inflation. We want to do that efficiently, though, and that means we want to do it. If you move too soon, you wind up maybe not getting inflation all the way fixed, and you have to come back. That's inefficient. If you move too late, you might do unnecessary damage to the labor market. So there won't be, in the end, a big inflationary problem. What we're trying to do is accomplish that in a way that is efficient. But in the end, there should be no doubt that we will do what we need to do to keep inflation under control. Ideally, we do it efficiently.
Michael McKee from Bloomberg Television and Radio. The one big bill, leaving aside the adjectives, do you expect it to add stimulus to the economy in 2026, and would that be an argument for remaining on hold or cutting back on the number of rate cuts you would expect for next year?
So, of course, let me just ritual disclaimer that we don't express any judgments or anything like that on fiscal legislation or other legislation for that matter. But I would say when you think that the biggest part of the bill was making permanent existing law on taxes, I don't think we see it as particularly stimulative. There should be some stimulative effect, but it shouldn't be significant over the next couple of years.
And to follow up, what do you, well, I don't want to put this in terms of you and the president, so let me ask it this way. Do you have concerns about the cost to the government of keeping rates elevated for longer in terms of interest rate charges?
Yeah, no, that's, we have a mandate, and that's maximum employment and price stability. And it is, it's not something we do to consider the cost to the government of our rate changes. We have to be able to look at the goal variables Congress has given us, use the tools they've given us to achieve those goals, and that's what we do. We don't consider the fiscal needs of the federal government. No advanced economy central bank does that, and it wouldn't be good for, if we did do that, it would be good neither for our credibility nor for the credibility of U.S. fiscal policy. So it's just not something we take into consideration.
Victoria.
Hi, Victoria Guida with Politico. When it comes to the renovations of the Federal Reserve's headquarters that the administration has been looking into, do you see their interest in that issue as being directly tied to the president's push to get you to lower interest rates?
Not for me to say. I will say we had a nice visit with the president. It was an honor to host him. It's not something that happens very often at the Federal Reserve to have the president come over, let alone to visit a building. But it was a good visit.
Are there any aspects of the project that they've raised that you see as making you reconsider any aspects of the project?
So, this project was hatched and conceived almost a decade ago now, and we went through the very long process of clearing it through historic preservation at the National Capital Planning Commission, and a lot of back and forth there. It was very constructive. We started out to do the work, and we're very well along on that work, and I was quite pleased to have the president say multiple times that what he really wanted to see was us getting this construction completed as soon as possible. That is our focus, and that's what we're going to do.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Andrew Ackerman with the Washington Post. What message do you take from the fact that inflation hit 2.1% last September and has bounced higher since? Why do you think financial conditions are restrictive and a neutral rate's below 4% when inflation has stopped falling for almost a year?
So inflation, when you talk about these 12-month inflation measures, you're always battling residual seasonality. So we'll have, for example, 2 months of high inflation sometimes early in the year, and then inflation turns lower, and a lot of that may just be an artifact. So that's why we look at the 12-month numbers. I think inflation is most of the way back to 2%. There are things like the catch-up inflation. So, for example, all the insurance costs that they're only now going through inflation, but they actually reflect inflationary pressures from 2-3 years ago. So that's got to go through. In addition, now we have 3 or 4 tenths of inflation in core inflation from tariffs. So, and we can't really separate that out. We're not going to have a separate kind of inflation that isn't the tariffs. We're always going to be dealing with all of inflation. But the composition, as I mentioned, has really changed. And if you go back to the last couple of years, it was all about services inflation, which was being very sticky. Now services inflation is coming down nicely. Goods inflation was well behaved before, and now goods inflation is going up. So the story has really changed. That's partially because of tariffs. It's also partially because we had restrictive policy in place, and we've seen that the result of that gradually work its way through the services economy.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to ask is, are you comfortable that BLS can continue performing their mission effectively if they take an 8% reduction in headcount and authorized spending as the administration has proposed?
I'm not going to comment on the administration's proposal. I do think, as I've said, I think that we're getting the data that we need to do our jobs, and I think it's really important that good data helps not just the Fed, it helps the government, but it also helps the private sector. People in the economy, they use this data a lot too, so it's quite important for our economy and certainly for the Fed's work and other government agencies' work that we continue to get better at data. That's what we've been doing for 100 years. We've been getting better and better and better. It's very hard to accurately capture in real time the output of a $20+ trillion economy. And the United States has been a leader in that for 100 years, and we really need to continue that, in my view.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Edward Lawrence from Fox Business. How concerned are you with the data that we're coming in, showing no significant upward trend in inflation over the past 6 months, that the wait-and-see approach for inflation is actually giving companies cover to raise prices?
How concerned am I that say that again?
The wait-and-see approach is giving...
The wait-and-see approach, what do you mean by that?
For cutting rates. You're waiting to see if the tariffs will affect inflation. So it's a wait-and-see approach.
Well, so that's where policy's restrictive. When we start cutting, it'll go toward neutral.
Okay. This delay, though, where you're saying there's a one-time price increase for tariffs, which possibly could lead into bigger inflation or more inflation. Is that giving companies cover, though, to raise prices?
Well, what may be giving, it's not our policy stance, what may be giving, some companies will certainly be taking advantage of the fact of the tariffs and all of the discussion of how they're going to, companies will raise prices when and as they can. And so you saw it famously in the first administration of President Trump during those tariffs. Washing machines were tariffed, but dryers weren't. But what do you know? The price of dryers went up too, just like washing machines. So companies will often just they'll cross the street in a group, if you know what I mean. That'll happen. We don't see a lot of that. I mean, what we see now is basically the very beginnings of whatever the effects turn out to be on goods inflation. And I'll say again, they may be less than people estimate, or more than people estimate. They're not going to be zero. Consumers will pay some of this. Businesses will pay some of this. Retailers will pay some of this. But we're just going to have to see it through.
And just to follow, if I could, some additional tariffs have been in place since February, and things really haven't broken yet with the economy. So how do you justify to somebody who's looking for a house, who's facing a 7% mortgage and maybe can't afford those rates? How do you justify that?
Well, so the housing is a special case, right? We don't set mortgage rates at the Fed, right? We set an overnight rate, and the rates that go into mortgages are longer-term rates, like Treasury rates. It might be 30-year rates. It might be shorter than that, but it's not the overnight Fed's rate. It's not that we don't have any effect. We do have an effect, but we're not the main effect. There are other things, going on in the housing sector, and one of those is just there's kind of a long-term housing shortage that we have. We haven't built enough housing. This is not something the Fed can help with, and that'll be the case even after things normalize. So I think the best thing that we can do for housing is to have 2% inflation and maximum employment, and that's what we can contribute to housing. There are lots of other jobs to do for the private sector and Congress, but that's what we're trying to get to. We've made a lot of progress toward that. We have a very good labor market right now. Inflation, we were very close to 2%. We're seeing some goods inflation move us away, but so far not very far away.
Chris.
Hi, Chair Powell. Thank you. Well, can you give us a little more about what kind of economic data does the Fed need to see before?
We have some movement in a Colorado dentist who is convicted of murder right now. They are sentencing him. Let's go to this live.
And ensures that he will spend his life behind bars. We hope this verdict also brings a sense of closure and peace to Angela's family, especially her children, who will live with the unimaginable pain of what James Craig did to their mother for the rest of their lives. Our hearts remain with them, and we are grateful for their strength, their patience, and their trust throughout this difficult process. Next to me, we have our top-notch trial team, who you will hear from shortly, and we have members of Angela's family. As with any case of this magnitude, this prosecution truly was a team effort. I'd like to personally thank the Aurora Police Department, including lead detective Bobby Joe Olson and Molly Harris, Arapahoe County Sheriff Tyler Brown and his team, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and our other law enforcement partners. I also want to recognize my predecessor, John Kellner, who ensured a smooth handoff of this case so that we could be sure to get justice for Angela. Importantly, we also want to recognize the many healthcare providers who cared for Angela Craig, who worked to save her life as she fought to live, and that as her husband continued to poison her. I will now turn it over to my Senior Chief Deputy DA, Michael Morrow, who will talk about the overwhelming evidence in this case and his fight to secure justice for Angela's family. Thank you.
Thank you, DA Patton. The evidence in this case included 10,000 pages of documents, 2 terabytes of data, and more than 300 witnesses. It overwhelmingly pointed to James Craig's guilt. Clearly, Craig wanted out of his marriage, but was unwilling to face the consequences of divorce, especially a divorce initiated by him. He gave in to greed and cowardice, ultimately treating Angela as an object. an obstacle to the life he wanted. The jury's verdict vindicates Angela's memory from Craig's attempted post-mortem character assassination. The jury said it loudly. Angela was not suicidal. She had no knowledge of or participation in what happened to her, which was that James Craig murdered her. It has been an honor to participate in this quest for justice for Angela, her family, and her friends, all of whom loved her dearly. Next, I'll invite Deputy DA Osama Maghrabi to talk more about the key evidence presented in court.
Now, it's difficult to kind of narrow in on key evidence in this case because, as my colleague just mentioned, there was just so much of it. So I think it's helpful to think in three distinct categories that kind of delineates where the evidence came from. There was technological evidence, there was medical and toxicological evidence, and then there was the people, the witnesses that came in and testified. In the technology category, there were obviously those searches that the defendant conducted on a computer in his office. There were communications and purchases regarding the substances that he so eagerly sought to secure to poison his wife. And then there was GPS data from his phone that showed him traveling from the area of his home to the office at key times when those searches were happening. Even showed him traveling up to a medical supplier as he tried to get cyanide over the counter, which was not the way he ultimately secured it. That didn't work. And also in that category of technological evidence, there were lots of surveillance hours, thousands of hours of footage, both on home surveillance and in the hospital. And a couple of key moments from that are when the footage showed the defendant with a syringe, first at home and then at the hospital, which he later admitted was the syringe, the implement that ended her life. The next category was evidence involving medical efforts to save Angela's life, which showed just how hard the doctors tried to figure out what was going on, how inexplicable her illness was, until the story broke and they understood that there was substances, that she was being poisoned. And those medical professionals then made efforts to sustain the samples, the blood samples, and send those off for testing. And then Aurora Police Department followed up as well. And samples of Angela's blood ultimately showed extremely elevated levels of arsenic, fatal levels of tetrahydrozoline, that's the eye drops, and fatal levels of cyanide. Again, all of which was administered by the defendant. And finally, that last category is the people that testified. Without fail, the people that we reached out to tell their piece of information came forward and did just that. They testified, gave the information that they had. They talked about Angela as they knew her. Even the medical professionals that talked to her in the hospital came forward and talked about a woman who was eagerly trying to figure out what was wrong so that she could get back to her children, to her family, and get better. Finally, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Prey to say some words on behalf of Angela and her family.
Thanks, Osama. We are undoubtedly elated that James Craig will never be able to do this to another person. I have a short statement approved by my family that I'd like to read. On behalf of Angela's family, we want to express our deepest gratitude to the 18th Judicial District Attorney's Office and the Aurora Police Department for their unwavering dedication to this case. We give special thanks to Assistant District Attorney Ryan Brackley, Deputy District Attorneys Mike Morrow and Osama Maghrabi, and Detective Bobby Joe Olson and Detective Molly Harris for their professionalism, compassion, and tenacity in seeking justice for Angela. We are also profoundly and grateful to the doctors and nurses who cared for Angela, her colleagues and friends, and others whose testimony and support have been invaluable throughout this process. Their contributions helped to ensure the truth was fully heard and Angela's memory was honored with integrity. Angela was vibrant and compassionate and devoted to those she loved. Although she was allergic to most animals, she had a fierce affection for them. Just one example of her big-heartedness. She loved her children and with unmatched fierceness was endlessly generous, always on call for her friends and family, offering help and support without hesitation. Contrary to how she was sometimes portrayed during this trial, Angela was anything but isolated. Her friends were tucked away in nearly every corner of the globe. She was intensely dedicated to staying active and healthy, both for herself and her family, and lived life with an adventurous spirit. Whether traveling, whether traveling, getting out to explore, or simply enjoying a good movie or a great book, her faith, love of God, and devotion to her family guided everything she did. With a strong personality, a quick wit, and a famously sharp sense of humor, she made every moment with her unforgettable. Well, this has been an incredibly difficult time for our family. We take comfort in the integrity and commitment shown by everyone who stood with us in pursuit of justice for Angela and her children. We thank you all so much for your support. And Angela, we miss you and we love you forever.
So, thank you, Mark. DA Patton and I joined the office in January of this year, 2 years into the investigation and prosecution of James Craig, and we were immediately impressed by the extraordinary hard work of our deputies, of our staff, the extraordinary hard work and dedication of the Aurora Police Department, and we finished this trial recognizing the extraordinary hard work of the jury in this case. Everyone worked really hard to bring justice for Angela Craig, and we are grateful to the jury's verdict and to the family for their patience and support throughout. It's been a long road, and they have never wavered in their belief that the right thing would happen in this case. With that, I'll take some questions.
Can
Claire?
you just clarify exactly what the count 7 was that was added on during jury instruction related to manslaughter or assisted suicide? Was that actually a count that James Craig
Yes.
being charged with?
No.
Can we say he was found guilty on all charges? How do we break that down?
So, last question is an interesting one. You can certainly say that James Craig was found guilty of everything that he was charged with by the state of Colorado. Count 7 was an added count requested by James Craig and his legal team. It's called a lesser non-included. Essentially, they argued that the facts as presented to the jury, all of it through James Craig, through his letters, through his texts, through his words, that Angela inexplicably did this as a suicide or tried to enlist him as a suicide. The judge felt that there was enough evidence for that to go to the jury. Clearly, the jury rejected that. You can say James Craig was convicted of all charges. He was found not guilty of a charge that he asked the jury to consider.
Sir, you talked about it earlier, referencing during the past 2 weeks, some folks had said there's plenty of circumstantial evidence, not a lot of direct evidence. You spoke to it a little bit earlier. Can you speak to what, and was it considered direct evidence? Did you say obviously the jury found enough? Can you kind of highlight some of those points evidential-wise?
So to the extent that there was some video of James Craig handling a particular shaker that contained the tetradrazoline, commonly known as Visine eye drops, one could argue there was direct evidence, but it was mostly a circumstantial case based on the fact that Angela Craig, from March 6th through March 15th, just got sick and sicker without explanation, all the while James Craig was ordering these poisons and researching how to order the poisons and how much poisons it would take to kill a person. It is probably the most direct circumstantial case you could ever have. I'm going to let one of my colleagues provide some further light on this question.
One of the instructions to the jury is that circumstantial evidence should be considered the way that they consider direct evidence. There's a legal distinction there, and the example that it gives is whether you see it snowing directly or you look outside and you see snow on the ground. And so in this case, the jury clearly understood either way that what had happened. So the idea that he's searching on a computer that searches are showing up on his computer, that's circumstantial. But you add in the circumstantial evidence that he also traveled to his office at the same time and that he's doing the searches are happening, helps show that he was doing it. Add in the fact that he's seen by another staff member in the dark on that particular computer inexplicably, that's another piece of evidence the jury can consider. Then the fact that he then immediately afterwards tells her he's going to get a package in the mail and it's personal, don't open it, let him know when it arrives. Yes, those things are circumstantial evidence. It doesn't mean it's not strong evidence. And I think that's what distinction should be made here, is that the weight of the evidence was still substantial. Even if there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, that's a legal distinction, but it wasn't a distinction that took away from just the strong proof that was found in this case.
Were you all able to talk to the jury?
I'm sorry?
Were you able to talk to the jury?
We did not, but I'd highlight that many members of the jury returned back into the courtroom to watch the sentencing proceeding for James Craig, and that's an unusual step. We don't often see that, but these jurors came back to watch James Craig get sentenced.
Can you say, William Walden didn't appear for a subpoena to court. Can you say what happened there?
William Walburn had some health issues that precluded him from coming to court. He did remain cooperative with the prosecution. He just could not make it to court for reasons which we just don't want to disclose.
Can we get clarification on counts 2 through 6? Was that the max sentence imposed in each of those? Because I've heard 57 thrown out there, but I don't believe they add up to 57 years on top of life.
Yeah,
Mike knows math.
We're bad at math, actually. Lawyers are just notoriously bad at math. It was a maximum sentence based on what the judge believed the available sentence was for each of those counts. So counts 2 and 3 are class 6 felonies. The maximum presumptive sentence is 18 months in the Department of Corrections on each of those. So that's what he got on each of those. Counts 4 and 6 are class 5 felonies. The maximum sentence is 3 years, so that's what he got on each of those. Count 5, the solicitation to commit murder, without getting too much into the legal weeds, it's a class 2 felony and the presumptive range is 12 to 24 years. So he got 24 years on that count, and when we added it up, we added it up incorrectly. So it's not 57 years, it's whatever that adds up to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Can one of you speak to the, I don't know if it's an emotional reaction or the prosecution reaction to the fact that her treatment was actively being sabotaged. She was in the hospital. How unique is that? What does that tell you about who this person is?
So we interviewed one of the doctors from UC Health during our trial preparation, and he expressed that sentiment that this man, the husband of his patient, was killing her right in front of him while he was trying to save her life. And one of the things that D.A. Patton spoke to was the great compassion and the great care of the nurses and the nurse practitioners, the emergency room doctors and the hospitalists in this case. All of them remembered Angela Craig. They remembered her of hundreds or thousands of patients they've dealt with from that date to this date. But they remembered her. They remembered her, how she was afraid, how frustrated she was, how scared she was, and how hopeful she was to get better. It was painful to watch them testify knowing how hard they worked to save her life, when ultimately they couldn't, because this man who appeared with her was killing her. It was a very emotional factor of this case.
Similarly, as you conducted the investigation, and in the history of the work that you've all done, were you just stunned time after time, revelation after revelation, of the bold nature, the blatant nature of James Craig and what he did? I mean, did it just stun you?
Absolutely stunning. I think that's a word that, I think it's a word that we used frequently. It never stopped getting worse. It never stopped getting more surreal. It never stopped getting more aggravatedly stunning. It's a good way to describe it. There was a moment in court, each of us were put in the position of having to read James Craig's words to the jury, whether they were letters or texts. And it was very, very difficult for us to read those words. It was difficult to read them, knowing what they meant and knowing the effect that he meant them to have on his listener.
May I ask, I don't know if you care to reply, Mark, or the Craig family, but the judge talked about the family's strength and resilience in court. And I don't think I'm alone with being amazed at the composure of the family members in this court. How is it you held together so well? And it's just remarkable. I don't know if you care to comment on that?
Look, we had to fight for food growing up.
Well, Mark had to fight for food.
Yeah. I'm in the lower 5.
I just showed up.
I just want to correct what you said, though. We're not the Craig family, we're the Prey family.
I apologize.
It's what Angie would have wanted.
She stood behind us, and that was our job for her, to be her voice, to be her strength, and to make sure justice was done for her.
Ma'am, is it possible to have you stand?
Ma'am. I said it, Angela stood beside us, and she would have wanted the same for, this is why you don't have me stand at the pulpit, for her. It was our job to be her voice, and it was our job to make sure that there was justice for Angela. So it was not a matter of would we, it was a matter of why wouldn't we.
Hard question, and please feel free to not answer it. Was there a time lag between when the prosecution team learned of these events and told you? Was there a time lag? No way, that can't be right. Was there any kind of denial that later had to be proven to you, or?
I can only speak for myself. I think that I knew a lot of the backstory. So for me, knowing her the way I knew her, I knew that her love for life would never be trumped by someone else. She would never leave her children. So as soon as that was presented to me, there was no question.
So I think I speak for my team. We got great strength from the Prey family when we showed up in court every morning and had to walk down that hallway towards the courtroom, and knowing they were behind us gave us great strength.
This is a question for the Prey family as well, if you want to answer it. We saw 3 of the children in court. Can you speak to how collectively, without naming them, obviously, they're handling the situation?
No.
No? Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, Sherry took an interview. It's amazing.
Appeals process, is there any grounds for any kind of appeals? You guys are already thinking about a case like this?
So there will inevitably be an appeal in this case, and we'll stand ready to defend this conviction.
There was obviously nationwide attention on this case, on this theme, if you will. Why do you think this case has garnered so much attention? What about this case do so many people, why does it touch so many nerves?
You know, I think when I'm going to pass this one on to one of my colleagues. I was not part of this case in the beginning when all of this was coming together, and I'll pass it on to Mike.
Well, I'll say I think about Angela Craig every single day. I never got to meet her. And I think people are fascinated because of the absolute senselessness, the absolute heinousness of what occurred. And that there was no way really for her or anyone to see this coming. It's not as though she was engaged in any kind of risky behavior or lifestyle, and not that that justifies anything that befalls anybody who is, but sometimes you can understand that a little bit better. This was a woman who just went to church and took care of her family, and should have been safe in her home with her husband of more than 20 years, the father of her 6 children. She should have been in no danger. I mean, she was physically and mentally well. She worked on those things every day, above average physical fitness, and she should have lived another 50 years at least. And I think people just are shocked that something like this could happen to someone like her. I think that's why.
If I could add to that, I think part of it is just really what we referred to earlier as the stunning nature of this offense. This is Angela's husband is poisoning her, causing her to die a slow death. It wasn't something done in the heat of passion. It was deliberate. It was over the course of days. And then the cover-up afterwards, enlisting his own daughter to attempt to make a deep fake video. To me, that was what was so stunning about this case, and I think that's why it's garnered national attention.
I have one question. It's not only the stunning nature of this, but you think about if not for this, if not for this, if not for this, like the Redfords, the office manager. There's so many different. Karen Kane coming forward. Can you kind of give us an idea of the heroes in this case who were able, if not for them, she might not have had an autopsy and she might have been cremated?
So certainly the office manager, in recognizing that something was wrong, and the office manager also in her testimony expressed a lot of care and concern for Angela. Dr. Craig, who I think I'm going to call James Craig at this point, he got a lot of texts from people in his life every day. How's Angela? How is she doing? Is she getting better? Have you figured out what's wrong with her? It was the office manager who put it all together and made the right phone call. It was Dr. Ryan Redfern and his wife, Dr. Michelle Redfern, who reported this to the hospital staff, and the hospital staff immediately went into action, and they did what they can do to try to save her life. And it was too late, but they went then and confronted James Craig, and they held him to the truth, which they eventually got from him. And then the other heroes are those who continue to come forward, those who continue to cooperate with the police. Many of them from within the Arapahoe County Jail, and members of their family and people that they were able to contact. People came forward because it just wasn't right. One of our alleged jailhouse witnesses said it was just the right thing to do. What he did to his wife was wrong. It was the right thing to do. So everyone who cooperated, who participated, were the heroes of this case. And I think of those detectives from the Aurora Police Department who got involved in this case in the evening of March 15th and didn't sleep for days and didn't stop working until about an hour ago when the jury came back and found James Craig guilty. So a lot of heroes in this case.
Does this case stand apart for you? Is this the most, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is it, if not unusual, the most heinous that you saw handled?
I think we can go down the row here and we can all say that as long as we've been in this work, we've seen a lot of really horrible things. This was among one of the most horrible things. And D.A. Patton just alluded to enlisting his daughter to try to help him cover this case up, to fix this case. It was probably one of the more heinous things that I've seen. So seeing no further questions, no further hands, thanks everyone for coming. Eric Ross, our PIO, Jamie Sorrells, myself were available for any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the prosecution taking a lot of questions, a lot of it centering around the evidence and really what they explained in trial to come to this situation today. The conviction that they got, getting a life sentence for dentist James Craig for taking his wife's life a couple of years back in 2023. Let's go now to the Senate floor as discussions continue. Before it was around the big, beautiful bill, but let's go to this now to learn more.
Instruction. Mr. President, I yield back.
Let me yield to Senator Merkley for 10 minutes.
Mr. President.
Morgan is recognized.
Following the attacks of October 7th in 2023, Israel had every right to go after Hamas. But how they do so matters. Indiscriminate bombing with massive casualties among women and children is horrific, completely unacceptable. Blocking food and medicine with the goal of inducing starvation is horrific and unacceptable. And that is true under any religious or moral code. Let me tell you about a few children the AP reported on a couple weeks ago. 4 children who starved to death, ranging from 4 months old to 2 years old. Picture that little child in your arm. Their legs and arms just a twig. Their ribs showing every indentation. And then finally their body, as it goes through malnutrition, starts to consume itself, and they died of gastric arrest. Their stomachs and ability to absorb nutrition shut down, and they died. The hospital they were at, the patient's friend's hospital, had run out of emergency nutrition supplies. There are supplies that are specially designed for malnutrition among children. There are high-calorie biscuits and a high-calorie peanut paste enriched with milk powder that often goes by the name Plumpy Nut. It's designed to help save them from severe acute malnutrition. Couldn't we have enough such assistance that no child would be starving to death in Gaza? Organizations across Gaza have been running out of these supplies. UNICEF warned that their locations are running out. In fact, they said they would run out of this high nutrition assistance for children 2 weeks from now. Doctors working with malnourished children are saying the wards are quiet. And if you've been around a ward of children, you know that they are not quiet. But why are these children quiet? Because they don't have the energy to cry. Nora has an 11-month-old son. He's deeply malnourished. He's missing his major developmental milestones. And she says, "My son is supposed to be drinking formula milk, but there is none. And I am barely able to breastfeed. My milk has almost dried up because I'm also not eating well." And in fact, Nora is in better condition than many other mothers because many mothers across Gaza were unable to breastfeed at all because of their own malnourishment. Sama, another mother, relays that her family was driven from their home by airstrikes, certainly true for almost every family in Gaza. And she says, "I am pregnant, but I have not eaten anything since yesterday." Dr. Mohammed Fadlallah of Doctors Without Borders says the Gaza health system is overwhelmed and it's collapsing. And a Doctors Without Borders report says that doctors and nurses are doing their best with dwindling supplies amidst near daily mass casualty incidents, and that their clinics report treating hundreds of people injured at food distribution sites and from ongoing attacks, while their doctors and nurses are working day after day, shift after shift, without eating themselves. The suffering is unimaginable. I've called for international reporters to be allowed in so we could all see exactly what is happening. I've called for members of Congress to be allowed in, to bear witness to what is happening. But the Netanyahu government has said no reporters, no members of Congress. More than 60,000 Palestinians have been killed, widely reported. But understand this, 18,500 of them were children. According to reporting by Associated Press, more than 80 children have died from malnutrition-related causes. And for every child who dies of malnutrition, there are thousands more in deep trouble. UNICEF, on a July 25th report, said 320,000 children are at risk of acute malnutrition, with thousands already suffering from severe malnutrition, the deadliest form. This headline from the Washington Post, 60,000 Gazans have been killed, 18,500 were children. These are their names. That was in today's paper. Take a look at it, colleagues. Take a look at the pages of microscopic names, all children, and every name here on this poster, a child who is less than a year old. These are not just numbers. These are individuals beloved by their family, children who are dying, children who are deeply malnourished. Let me read you a couple names to remind us all of the fact that these are individuals just like you are an individual, just like I am an individual, my friends, my colleagues. Anissa Ali, Dia Saleh Musa, Basel Abu Jasser, Malik Abu Saif, Wael Asaf, Sama Darwish. All these children, almost 1,000 of them under the age of 1. They never got a chance to pursue their dreams. They were cut down by bombing and by malnutrition. The IPC, the world's leading hunger monitor, published a report on Tuesday. And I have that report here. Let me hold it up. This report, it says, and I quote, "The worst case scenario of famine is playing out in the Gaza Strip." The worst case. The World Food Program reports that hunger in Gaza has reached, quote, "astonishing levels of desperation, and a third of the population is not eating for multiple days in a row." But what do we hear from the head man, the leader in Israel, Netanyahu? He says on Sunday, this past Sunday, quote, "There is no starvation in Gaza." Let me be clear, that is a lie. The world knows it is a lie. We know that it is a lie. Donald Trump knows that it is a lie. President Trump said on Monday, quote, "Some of those kids, that's real starvation stuff. I see it, and you can't fake that." The use of food and water and medicine as a weapon of war against civilians, including against the children, the ill, the elderly, the women, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable under international law. It's unacceptable under any religious or moral code. I have much more to share on this topic. Many more facts I'd like to present. But I want to make sure that my colleague from Maryland, Senator Chris Van Hollen, gets an opportunity to share his thoughts. Now, we have called on addressing starvation the lack of food, going way back to January of last year, 19 months ago. We called on the Biden administration, we've called on the Trump administration. He has been a leader, understanding and reporting so many facts to help the rest of us understand what is going on. I will be voting against any weapon of war provided to Israel until every child and every woman has adequate nutrition in Gaza. My colleague, I yield to my colleague.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from Maryland.
And I thank the senator from Oregon, and I rise. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the following senators be permitted to speak prior to the scheduled roll call vote. Senator Van Hollen for up to 10 minutes, Senator Durbin for up to 2 minutes, Senator Risch for up to 5 minutes, and Senator Sanders for up to 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to oppose the transfer of over $675 million of U.S. taxpayer money to finance 1,000-pound bombs and 20,000 fully automatic rifles and other offensive weapons to the Netanyahu government. The humanitarian situation in Gaza has gone from horrible to hell on earth. Yesterday, we reached the grisly marker of over 60,000 people killed in Gaza, over half of them women and children, and the number could be much higher. More than 133 people have died of starvation, over 80 of them children, most of them this month. Experts have been warning about the threat of famine in Gaza for months, ever since the Netanyahu government imposed a total blockade on all humanitarian assistance going into Gaza on March 2nd. This is a man-made, preventable crisis, and the solution is clear. The Netanyahu government must immediately allow the UN-led distribution system to resume delivery of aid into Gaza to avert a full-blown famine. I have long said that Israel is completely justified in its war against Hamas, which murdered over 1,200 people and seized over 250 hostages on October 7th. And we must not rest until every remaining hostage comes home, and there must be no more October 7th. But the Netanyahu government is not justified in imposing collective punishment against all of the people of Gaza to pay for the sins of Hamas. And yet that is what is going on as it uses food and humanitarian aid as a weapon of war. There are now 500,000 people facing famine-like conditions in Gaza, but they're not just numbers. Colleagues, this is an awful, awful picture. But we have to look at what's happening in Gaza. This is baby Zainab. She weighed 6.6 pounds when she was born 5 months ago. She was 4.4 pounds when she died a few days ago. Her life could have been saved with a special type of baby formula, but none of that formula can be found in Gaza. It wasn't let in. For months, the Netanyahu government has been blocking thousands of truckloads of life-saving aid that could save babies like Zainab. And yet, the Netanyahu government is denying what every human being can see, and they're denying the humanity of people suffering. Just 3 days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu said, and I quote, "There's no starvation in Gaza."
All right, we are wrapping our 7 to 9 stream. Of course, looking ahead to tonight at 11 o'clock, where we will update all things, including our weather forecast, to see some relief that is right ahead of us in the next couple of days after all these 90-degree temperatures that we've had. We appreciate your time here on WCNC Plus. Please download WCNC Plus. Tell your friends and family. We'll see you tonight at 11.